and our understandings. Now let's bring in two former federal prosecutors, Elliot Williams and Shanlon Wu. All right, first, have you ever heard of anything like this happening before?
I was first a prosecutor in, 2004? So that's how I mean, 16 years ago. Never seen anything like this. Bonkers.
Absolutely never. It's
okay.
backwards.
Yeah. So just to make the record clear, am I right that this is the way it usually works? I'm the line prosecutor. I'm working the actual case. You guys are the bigs. I finish the case. I want to make a sentencing recommendation. You know what that recommendation is, and we discuss in-house. But I do not make that recommendation until you guys have decided that's the recommendation to make. Is that true?
That's right. It actually goes slightly further than that. There are a lot of times when the high-powered defense counsel will come in to appeal some decisions, like this recommendation for sentence is going to be too high, don't indict my client. I've sat in on a lot of those kinds of meetings, Chris. They never want to overturn. The higher-ups don't want to overturn the lower people because you want to go with the people that know the case.
So there's a reluctance to do it in general. When you fight the government, you are asking for the high end of the range that is often said by you guys to defendants that if you take us to trial on this and you lose, exactly, we go upper end. But again, just to reinforce this point that Shan is making, the idea that this was organic. Ooh, 7 to 9 you asked for. That's too much. You know what? Let's back this off. What's the chance that it was organic?
Right here is the sentencing memorandum. It goes in excruciating detail, because a lot of people think it's 7 to 9 years. It's, we think he's a bad guy, so let's just throw 7 to 9 years at him. It's actually almost quite scientific in a way, because what happens is an individual's convicted of an offense, and then based on the characteristics of him and the crime, little things tick that sentence up. So for instance, if there's a threat of violence, as we saw in this case, if it's his own case, if it's a pattern that involved a lot of planning, all of these things tick the sentence up. And what the prosecutors landed on here was a 7 to 9 year sentence. But it wasn't just an arbitrary thing. If you notice...
Is it too harsh?
Well, I'm not going to say whether it's too harsh. It's what the sentencing guidelines say. Now, there's a bigger question to be had about, are the sentencing guidelines themselves, as they're written now, fair? And that's a question for Congress and the U.S. Sentencing Commission. But it's not for me to sit here and say, well, I think it's just not nice because the calculation...
No, I'm saying, does the sentence match the calculations?
The sentence absolutely matches the calculations.
Do you agree with that?
It's on the high end of the calculations. When I first heard that, I thought it was high. I didn't think the judge would sentence that high. So okay, it's a high.
But the chance that it was put out there rogue and that the higher-ups didn't have a chance to weigh in, zero. So then that has to lead us to one factual conclusion.
Oh, yes.
They changed their mind for political reason, not prosecutorial reason.
It's hard to see how it's anything other than that, just because, to add to what Chen was saying a little bit earlier, in a case this high profile, with a defendant this prominent, in a matter of such national prominence, there would absolutely be meetings at the highest levels to make sure that all the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed. And so the notion that they'd come up with this sentence that not everybody was on the same page, and then all of a sudden the folks higher up either changed their mind or weren't briefed, that's just preposterous, particularly given the caliber of prosecutors that you're dealing with, career prosecutors, not political hacks or anything like that.
And not only that, in their watered down memo, the second one, it doesn't change any analysis. It's not like, oh, we made a mistake, we didn't take this into account. There's no real analysis.
It merely just
changes their mind.
Well, not only that, it says we're not going to make a recommendation as to sentencing. Right. They don't put a number on it. They don't have a calculation.
They just say less.
They just, it's draconian, or whatever the word they used was, for 7 to 9 years was too high.
And you know what's interesting about this, as is many things Trump, it's what is the motivating interest? Okay, let's say he went over there and said, I don't like this sentence. He didn't pardon him either. And he's actually said he should be pardoned, as if it was some collective effort. He doesn't. And here is Stone. We call him his old confidant. He's more than that. Roger Stone is the oldest political advisor that this president has. He doesn't keep people around him for very long. Google, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Roy Cohn, his one-time lawyer and longtime advisor, has passed. Roger Stone is the oldest one since then. If he really wanted to help him, he wouldn't have done it this way. Gentlemen, thank you very much for perspective on how this usually works versus what is abnormal here. Bernie Sanders declares victory in New Hampshire. The numbers seem to bear it out at this point. But right on his heels, the man who got more delegates in Iowa, Pete Buttigieg. First two races, wildly overperforming, people saying he could be the right choice. Now, 2% between them. Let's take a closer look at what is fueling Buttigieg's rise. Next.